Hey guys, in this episode I'm going to do the thing that I said I really didn't want to do. I'm going to tell you about my vacation to the Outer Banks. But don't worry, I've put together some stuff and I'm going to try to make it interesting. Welcome to the NC Everything Podcast. I'm your host Curtis, and this is a weekly show where I talk about everything that has anything to do with North Carolina. If this is your first episode, don't worry, I don't typically talk about all the stuff I do when I'm not on camera. Actually, I didn't have an episode prepared. I thought I did, and I had my dates messed up, and so this was kind of a last minute idea to make sure I get an episode out for this week. And if you're a returning listener, then you know I spent 3 days in the Outer Banks. I talked about it a few times on the show. I was really excited to go, and I had a really good time. And now I'm actually done. I've built myself up, so I'm kind of anxious to tell you all about it. Now, before we get into it, if you enjoyed this episode or you're interested in what my regular content sounds like, you can check it out at www.thencEverythingpodcast.com. And right on the home screen is all my past episodes. But they're audio only. And as you can see, I'm back in my recording studio. It's really raining hard outside, and I wanted to get outside today. It's actually warm, even though it's raining. But I'm up here to stay dry, and also the best place for me to record outside is under a shed, and that rain makes a lot of noise. Also, this is one of the first times in a long time that I didn't record at the crack of dawn on Saturday or Sunday morning. As a matter of fact, I just got off work about an hour ago. So if it looks like I'm going to sleep, then I'm probably going to sleep. But you're not going to have to sit here and watch me nap. I'll of course cut all that out if I do happen to doze off. But I am pretty tired, so don't think I'm not excited about this. I really am. I'm just super tired. Well, that's enough of that, so let's go ahead and get into the content. Now, like I said, I went down to the Outer Banks for a few days, and I was really excited about that trip. It's been a long time since I've been out there. The last time I went out there was on a field trip for my kid, and it was a few years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. So I was really anxious to get back out there, and it was cold and it was windy, but I had a really good time just because cold and windy on the Outer Banks or cold or windy at the beach, that's still a lot better than cold and windy here at the house. All right, so I started my vacation really last Friday morning. But we didn't leave this area until about lunchtime. I had to pick my kid up from school. And we got on Interstate 40 and we headed east. And a lot of times the way me and my wife vacation, we have kind of a tentative plan of what we want to do. But it's always open for deviation. And one of our deviations was a barbecue restaurant in a town called Ayden. And this restaurant is called the Skylight Inn. Now, it really doesn't sound like a barbecue restaurant, but it's pretty famous. My wife had said she heard about it here, there, and yonder. You know, I don't read a whole lot of food magazines, but it's been written about. So we go down to Ayden, and we find the Skylight Inn. And it's a small restaurant. It's not right in the middle of town. It's kind of on the outskirts. And even though my wife had said that they had written about this restaurant in several magazines, I was kind of skeptical because we had went to a place in Asheville that was, you know, renowned for its chicken sandwich, and it wasn't a very good chicken sandwich. I mean, it was a fine chicken sandwich, but it wasn't worth writing about, I don't think. And I don't know if people pay to get in those magazines, but I was skeptical. I thought we were going to have another chicken sandwich. But I can tell you, we went to the Skylight Inn, and it was the best damn barbecue I've ever had in my life. And I've never had bad barbecue. I'm not real picky. I love barbecue, but this barbecue stood way out from the rest. And so I feel like it was worth everything ever written about it. So this barbecue restaurant, the Skylight Inn, it was started by Walter B. Jones in 1947 when he was only 17 years old. Now, even though his name was Walter B. Jones, he went by Pete. And so a lot of people just call this Pete's Barbecue. And I couldn't find out if Pete's Barbecue was the original name of the barbecue joint, but a lot of the locals still call it that, like I said. But this restaurant's been open ever since he opened it in 1947. And down here, they smoke whole hogs. And if you don't know much about barbecue, sometimes, over close to where I'm at in the western part of North Carolina, they smoke hams and shoulders. But down east, they'll smoke a whole entire hog. And so this is whole hog barbecue. And they don't use any gas. They smoke it the old-fashioned way with wood. In fact, and I think I got a picture of this, but when you pull up in the parking lot, there's literally just piles and piles of firewood out back. It's so much firewood. And so we go in, and of course there's a pretty long line, and they're moving pretty good, but everybody in there is super friendly, and I'm not being sponsored by the Skylight Inn. These are all my genuine feelings, but everybody's super nice. The barbecue was amazing, and I'm really glad we decided to make a pit stop there. Now, I said that they were written about. My wife told me that people had written about them, but I didn't quite know the extent of the hoorah around this barbecue restaurant. Well, in 1979, the National Geographic, they published a book called The Back Roads of America. And in this book, they said Pete Jones's Skylight Inn was some of the best barbecue in the country. In 1982, Pete Jones was invited to serve his barbecue at the Congressional Bowl. And that's where President Reagan and President Bush had his barbecue for the first time. And later on, he got a letter from these guys telling him just how good his barbecue was. It says they were featured in Southern Living magazine, but I couldn't find a date on that one. There was a write-up about them in People magazine in 1991, and GQ done an article on them in 1999. In 2003, they got the James Beard Award. And in the culinary world, or the restaurant world, the James Beard Award is like, it's kind of like the Grammys of restaurants. It's really prestigious. And the Skylight Inn has also been on TV networks like the Travel Channel, the Food Network, and the History Channel. Now in 2006, Pete Jones passed away, and now the restaurant is run by his son Bruce, his nephew Jeff, and his grandson Sam Jones. So we leave the Skylight Inn with our bellies full, and we head to Bath. Now Bath, it wasn't tentative. I said from the very start that I wanted to go visit Bath, North Carolina. Now I covered Bath in episode 68, but if you don't know much about Bath, and most of these things I'm going to give you just a brief history on it. A lot of them I will probably return to and do a full episode on. But Bath was founded in 1705, and that makes this the oldest incorporated city in the state of North Carolina. Now when you go to Bath, you can find St. Thomas Church, which is the oldest church in North Carolina, and you can visit the Palmer Marsh House, which is the oldest house in Bath. It was built in 1751. And one of my favorite things about Bath, Blackbeard used to live in Bath for a short time, and I've read that his house was on Plum Creek, or Plum Point. Blackbeard lived on Plum Point when he lived in Bath. And so we're down there, and I look at the map, and you can see on the GPS map that Plum Point is still there. And so we walk away from St. Thomas Church down here to this little park. I can't remember the name of that park. But if you look out there, and it took me a second to find it, but there's Plum Point. Now, there's no house out there. It's on Bath Creek, by the way. The point sticks out into Bath Creek. There's no house out there right now, not that I know of. But for me, it was amazing that I could sit there and look out and see the plot of land where Blackbeard once lived. And there's a picture of me. Some of you may have seen this on Facebook when I posted it. But there's a picture that my wife took where I'm trying to point behind me to Plum Point. I'll post that picture. But if I ain't mistaken, it's on private land, so I'm not so sure you can go over there and have a look around. By the way, I'm going to say a few times that I'll post the pictures. If you're watching this on YouTube, I'm going to try to get these to pop up as I talk. I'm not sure if I can do that yet, but if I can't, you can check the show notes at the website. Alright, so we leave Bath. Now it's getting kind of dark. And we finally cross over Roanoke Island, and we get to the Outer Banks, and we find us a place to stay. Now it's Saturday morning, and I get up pretty early anyway, but my wife set an alarm to make sure we got up early. We wanted to see the sunrise and really make the most of the day. I'm sure the boys really appreciated that. But we got up early, and first thing I said was, well, let's get some breakfast somewhere. Why don't you get on the internet and look for a place to get a good biscuit? And the first thing she pops up with is this place called Biscuits and Porn. And I thought it was some sort of joke, you know, biscuits and pornography. That can't be right. But it was a real place. But then I told her, you know, I don't want to take the kids somewhere, you know, like that. You know, they're young boys. But she got to looking at it, and it was in a store, like the back of a store is what we assumed. So we're all getting ready, and we're kind of half humoring the idea of going to get breakfast at Biscuits and Porn. We leave the hotel, and we decide, all right, that's where we're going to go. So the Biscuits and Porn restaurant is in a Citgo station. And you go in, and yes, they have a bunch of porn in there. A lot of it's like 80s or 90s porn magazines. It's kind of it's kind of like a gimmick. But in the Citgo, there is a kitchen back there, and they're making biscuits. And I'm not just going to keep talking about food. Not everything I ate was phenomenal, but they were very, very good biscuits. And I might have a picture of one of the porn biscuits, I guess you could call it. But I didn't buy any porn. But I did buy a toboggan that says Biscuits and Porn on it. And again, if you followed my Facebook post during my vacation, you'll see me wearing that a few times. I'll try to post a picture of it too. But it is a unique name for a biscuit place, so I looked that up. And this place started out as a biscuit joint called Miss Helen's back in 1978. Well, then in the early 2000s, a bunch of surfer dudes kind of nicknamed the place Biscuits and Porn. I'm not sure why they nicknamed it that, unless they were selling porn back then. But the name stuck, and they made it official. And now, with our bellies full, again, we head over to Jockeys Ridge State Park. And we're only staying about 3 miles from there. So we decided to hit it first. But Jockeys Ridge is the largest sand dune on the East Coast, and it became a state park in 1975. And the park spreads around 420 acres. And if you've never been, definitely look out for the pictures, because the way Jockeys Ridge State Park is set up, you park and you'll go to the visitor center, although they're doing renovations on it now. I was kind of disappointed. But then you go through this grove of trees. It's like a little trail. It looks pretty wooded. But when you come out on the other side, I told my wife it was almost like Mario Brothers, and we went down the pipe. Because you come out the other side, and it's nothing but sand. It looks like you're in the desert world. It's the strangest feeling, but it's really cool to be in a forest glade, and then all of a sudden you're surrounded by nothing but sand as far as you can see. But check out my Jockeys Ridge episode. Like I said, that's episode 11, and it's one I'm pretty happy with. Well, we stay at Jockeys Ridge for about an hour or so, and then we start heading south. And the first thing we go to is the Body Island Lighthouse. I've always assumed it was Body Island Lighthouse, but no, it's Body Island Lighthouse. And the Body Island Lighthouse that you see today is actually the third Body Island Lighthouse. The first one was built on Pea Island in 1847, but 12 years later it was abandoned because it had a unstable foundation. They rebuilt it in 1859, but then the Confederates blew it up in 1861. And yes, the Confederates occupied this area, but they were afraid that the Union would take it and use it to their advantage, so they destroyed their own lighthouse. And so they built a third Body Island Lighthouse in 1872. It was 164 feet tall, and it's the one that you can see today. And they say that the reason it got the name Body Island was because of all the bodies that washed up on shore from the graveyard of the Atlantic. And if you don't know what the graveyard of the Atlantic is, the North Carolina coast is a treacherous place to travel for ships, and so a ton of ships have crashed over the years out there, and so they call it the graveyard of the Atlantic. And I'll probably cover that in an episode sometime in the future. And this was the first of 3 lighthouses I visited while I was in the Outer Banks. I covered lighthouses in episode 49, but it was kind of a broad coverage. I may one day return and do a deep dive into Body and Hatteras and Currituck, which is the 3 I saw while I was down there. But we leave Body Island Lighthouse and we stop over on Pea Island, and I wanted to see the life-saving station they had there. Now, I covered the Pea Island life-saving station in episode 54. And that's a pretty good episode too. I'm pretty proud of that one. But at the Pea Island life-saving station, there was Richard Etheridge and his all-black crew of lifesavers. And Richard Etheridge and his guys They performed a bunch of heroic rescues, but there's one in particular I talk about in episode 54. But we didn't stay in that area too awful long. We kept on heading south. Now, we passed by the Hatteras Lighthouse to get to the graveyard of the Atlantic Museum. And that was fine. We just decided to go ahead and hit the Hatteras Lighthouse on the way back up the shore. Now, I had read a few times that the graveyard of the Atlantic Museum was a really cool place to see, but it was highly recommended by Nicholas Matthew, who's a fan of the show and a member of the Facebook group. And he was right on the money. This place was really awesome. And he told me he didn't know if they still had the Blackbeard exhibit, but man, they did. And I'm a geek about Blackbeard anyway. Now, they had artifacts from the Queen Anne's Revenge there in the museum, like some shell shot and a cannonball. But one thing, and remember, I already confessed to being a geek, but one thing in the Blackbeard exhibit that I thought was one of the coolest was they had a little, maybe 3-inch piece of rope that came off the Queen Anne's Revenge. And like I always say, I like history that you can get close to. So even though it was behind a glass case, I'm standing, inches away from a piece of rope that Blackbeard himself may have done something with. It's just really cool to me to be that close to something I'm that passionate about. Now, it wasn't just Blackbeard stuff in the Hatteras or in the graveyard of the Atlantic Museum. They had some German U-boat stuff in there from the war. And they had a really cool model of the Carol A. Deering, which is a kind of a mysterious ghost story or mysterious nautical story. And I covered that in episode 2. And finally, we get to Cape Hatteras, the largest or tallest lighthouse on the East Coast. Now, the reason they had to have Hatteras here is because off the coast of Hatteras, remember, graveyard of the Atlantic, right off the coast there's a 12-mile sandbar they call Diamond Shoals, and that's where a lot of ships have run aground and sank. Well, construction began on the Hatteras Lighthouse in 1799, and it was finally lit in 1803. And this first iteration of the Hatteras Lighthouse was 90 feet tall, and it was powered by whale lamp oil. Well, by 1803, a lot of people were complaining that the lighthouse was too short and you couldn't see it too good. And so they made some changes 50 years later. Pretty fast, but 50 years later, in 1853, they added 60 feet to the height of the lighthouse. And this made it 150 feet tall. Well, then, in 1868, they decided to build a new Hatteras Lighthouse. And this lighthouse was finally lit in 1870. And the 1803 lighthouse that was there was demolished. Now, like I said, the Hatteras Lighthouse we see today is the tallest lighthouse on the East Coast, and it's 198 feet tall. But there was a problem. The beach was eroding, so they had to do something. So the Bureau of Lighthouses decommissioned the Cape Hatteras Lighthouse in 1935. But then, on November 9th, 1937, the Cape Hatteras Light Station was transferred to the National Park Service. But then, in January 23rd of 1950, the Coast Guard opened the Hatteras Lighthouse back up. And the reason was that even though the beach had eroded in years past, the changing sands, the beach had built back up again. But between the 1960s and the 1980s, the beach was eroding again. Then in 1999, the Cape Hatteras Lighthouse was moved to its current location. And I think I said in my Lighthouse episode, we had gone down to the Outer Banks to see the Cape Hatteras Lighthouse at this time. And we knew they were moving it. It was really big news because you can't just pick a lighthouse up and move it. Well, I guess that's exactly what they did. But we went down to go see it, and we couldn't get so close to it because of the move. But it was really cool to see that moment in history where they literally moved a lighthouse. And it was slow going, but it wasn't that slow. They moved 2,900 feet in 23 days. So after we left the Hatteras Lighthouse, we went back to the room. Now, when I say we went back to our room, it sounds like a short trip. I think it was like 50 miles from our hotel down to the graveyard of the Atlantic Museum, which is only a few miles from the Hatteras Lighthouse. So we had a long ride down there, and we had a long ride back. But when we got back, we chilled out, took it easy, sit around the pool, and it was an indoor pool. I wasn't making my boys swim outside in the wind in the cold. But then Sunday rolls around. Sunday's our last full day on the Outer Banks. This time we didn't go to biscuits and porn. We actually ate some bagels and stuff in the room. And since we headed south the day before, this time we were going to head north. And it was my intention to stop by the Wright Brothers Memorial, which I'm going to talk about in a second. But they weren't opening up till later. And so we kept on going north up to the Currituck Lighthouse. And this is probably one of my favorites of all the lighthouses. I'm going to tell you why in just a second. But again, it's probably 30 miles up the Outer Banks to get to Currituck. But the Currituck Lighthouse was built in 1875. And this was the last major brick lighthouse that was built in the Outer Banks. And you see Hatteras and Body Island, they're brick too, but they're painted white, or white as a base coat. But Currituck is unpainted. And that's what makes it so pretty. It's literally brick red. And another thing is, it's completely surrounded by trees. So when you pull up to it, and again, I'm going to post pictures, but when you pull up to it, this beautiful red lighthouse is just popping out from the top of the trees. But that's not the way it was back in its heyday. It was there's a photograph inside the lighthouse of this, but back in its heyday, it was kind of a plain right around the lighthouse. There wasn't really anything taller, any shrubbery taller than 5 foot probably. It almost looked kind of barren around there. But this lighthouse is 162 feet to the roof, and there are 214 steps to get to the top. And we climbed every one of them. Now, we didn't climb Body, and we didn't climb Hatteras, but we came through and we decided to climb this one. It was kind of one of those, what do they call it, YOLO moments. You know, you only live once. And the thing about the YOLO moments, me and my wife, we are so busy, we take maybe 2 vacations a year. And we don't get to pick the best weekends. We kind of roll the dice and see what happens. That's why a lot of places we end up, it's not very ideal weather. Well, then when we get to these places, maybe I'm spoiling my kids, but I'm real quick to get them souvenirs and stuff like that, just because we don't get to go out very much. But we did climb to the top of this lighthouse, all 214 steps, and it was worth it. Because you walk out, you don't get to the very top of it, you're just underneath the light, but there's a walkway around it. But you get out here, and the view is incredible. Because the Outer Banks, if you don't know, is literally a narrow strip of land. And when you're riding down there, you can kind of see the ocean on one side, the sounds on the other. But when you get to the top of that lighthouse, you can really see it. I mean, it's just a strip of land going along the Atlantic Ocean. And it was windy down on the ground, but up there, I'm actually afraid of heights. Even though I do things like this that put me in danger of being up high. But you get up there, and that wind is just howling past that lighthouse, the top of that lighthouse. It is so loud and so cold. But we got a bunch of pictures and had a good time. Well, then we go down, and now we're in the courtyard again. And I look back up at the top of this lighthouse where we were. From the ground, it's silent. You can feel the wind, but there's no noise. It looks so peaceful and quiet and calm. But then, you think you go up there and the wind is blowing so hard you can't hardly hear yourself speak. It's really strange. But this was the first time I'd ever been in a lighthouse, and I don't know if I'll go in all of them whenever I get a chance, but I would definitely go back to the top of Currituck Lighthouse. So now it's time to head on over to the Wright Brothers Memorial. But we had to make another pit stop. I can't not make this pit stop. You see, on the way to Currituck, you go through a town named Duck. And in Duck, there's a place called Duck Donuts. Now, Duck Donuts opened in 2007. And these are the best damn donuts you'll ever have. I know people will argue there's other better donut places. I haven't been to them. I've been to the regulars, Krispy Kreme. I know Krispy Kreme's a North Carolina business. You know, I support them. I love them. But I've been to Krispy Kreme. I've been to Dunkin'. Duck Donuts are so far removed from those two, it's insane. But the trick is, they serve made-to-order donuts. So they're not even cooking these things until you put your order in. And when they come out, they're almost too hot to touch. And they don't do just glazed donuts. I'm sure you can get a glazed donut. We got a 13. I can't remember why we got 13. but some of them have like Oreo crumbles on them, and some of them have graham cracker, and they got all different kinds of, I guess what I would probably call naughty food, because that's another thing. I've been eating right, been getting some exercise in, and then I go down there and it all went out the window. I had donuts and pizza and just mess. But I plan on getting back on the bandwagon really soon, maybe tomorrow. Now, if you want a duck donut and you don't want to ride all the way out to the Outer Banks to get one, that's fine, because now they have locations in Durham, Raleigh, Cary, Greensboro, High Point, Winston-Salem, and 2 in Fayetteville. So we leave there with our bellies full of donuts, and we go to the Wright Brothers Memorial. Now, I talked about the Wright Brothers in episode 25 when I covered aviation in North Carolina, but I only touched on the Wright Brothers because, cover your ears, kids, but the Wright Brothers those guys are self-righteous assholes. All the other achievements in aviation are overshadowed by what the Wright Brothers did at Kitty Hawk. And I don't mean to bring personal feelings into it, but I'm not a big fan of the Wright Brothers, but it's North Carolina history, and so I mention it. But the Wright Brothers went down in history as the first people to ever fly. And they took their famous flight on December 17th, 1903 in Kitty Hawk. Well, then in 1927, the Wright Brothers National Memorial opened up. Now, the memorial opened up in 1927, but it wasn't dedicated until November 14th, 1932. And if you go to the Wright Brothers Memorial, on top of Kill Devil Hill, there's this huge monument to the Wright Brothers. But when you go there, it's still a huge open field. And so you go through the gates, and right on the other side of the parking lot, there's actually a really sizable museum to the Wright Brothers. And it's kind of cool. They have a lot of artifacts in there, and there's diagrams and maps and stuff to show you what they did. There was actually 4 different flights here at Kitty Hawk. And on the back side of the museum is the actual field they flew in, and there's these markers where each flight ended. Now, they started all these flights in the same spot, and then they'll show you where they ended at. And then if you look south, that's where you see Kill Devil Hill, and you'll see that monument. And it's a pretty good walk down there. I'm not sure. It might be a quarter mile. I'm not real sure, but it's a decent walk. If you're up for a walk, you can walk down there, but you got to go up Kill Devil Hill, and it's kind of steep. And then they'll have this memorial there. And again, check for pictures. But even though I have personal feelings about the Wright Brothers, it is a really cool spot. And when you get on top of Kill Devil Hill, you can see exactly where they took their flight, and it's pretty cool. But we get done walking around there, maybe a couple hours there. It's a big area. And then I want to go back over to Roanoke Island. Now, on Roanoke Island is where the Lost Colonists landed. And I've always been intrigued by the Lost Colonists. I'm actually more intrigued by them than I am a lot of other mysteries in North Carolina. I'm just as intrigued by the Lost Colonists as I am Blackbeard. But we cross over to Roanoke Island, and we ride around looking at the place for a while, but then we go down, or go up to the north side of Roanoke Island. And truth be told, they don't know exactly where the Lost Colonies colony was, but they have a general idea. And so we go down there, and we go to Fort Raleigh. And Fort Raleigh is this earthen mound fort. It's kind of shaped like a star. So you go back there, and there's a signpost, and it shows you this where they have been doing some archaeology, because they have dug up around. That's how they know generally where the lost colony was. And in the years past, they have dug up around there, and they've found some artifacts. They found Native American artifacts. They found some Spanish stuff. I think Spanish stuff. Definitely European stuff there, though. But I'm sitting there looking at this earth fort to my right, and I'm looking at this archaeological site to my left, and this thought hit me. And when this thought popped in my head, it like froze me in my tracks, and I probably took a good 5 minutes just to enjoy this feeling. The thought was, this is where the United States started. Now, yes, we have Jamestown, and unfortunately that's in Virginia. You know how I feel about Virginia, and the lost colony was lost. They tried 3 times, and it never did take, So I guess a better way of putting that would be that this is one of the attempts of starting the United States. But that's one thing we have on the East Coast that they're not going to have in California or the Midwest. We're at the beginning of the United States. But I felt like being right there where the Roanoke colony was in that general area, it was just a really wonderful but eerie feeling that everything we have in the United States, everything you know of U.S. history, everything from then till now started right in that area. And if you want to pause this podcast and enjoy that moment like I did, I understand. But we walked around there. That was going to be our last full day in the Outer Banks. So we walked around there for a little while, and then we headed on back, and more swimming, more relaxing. The next day, we get up, and we hit the road heading back home. Now, the thing is, me and my wife, we never just head back home. We always allow time to explore on the way home, and we sure did here. The first place we went to was called the Digger's Dungeon. And I thought about going to the Digger's Dungeon while I was down there, but it was a little bit of a ride north, so I kind of, put it out of my mind. But we went right past the Digger's Dungeon on the way out of there. Now, the Digger's Dungeon is a gift shop dedicated to the gravedigger, and I covered the gravedigger in episode 27. But we pull into the parking lot of this gift shop, and there's 3 trucks out there. There's 2 green grave diggers, like you would know, the typical looking grave diggers. But one truck you may not recognize if you don't know the grave digger history is this old Chevy truck. And I recognized it right away. And I told my wife, there's no way that's the original grave digger. That has to be a replica. The thing was, the gift shop wasn't opening for another 10 minutes. So I walked around with my kids, and we looked at the monster trucks, and I was looking at this replica of the original gravedigger, and finally the gift shop opened. And the first thing I did was go to the counter, and there's a young boy working there, and I said, "Hey, that original gravedigger out there, that's a replica, right?" And he said, "No, sir, that's the original gravedigger." And I turned into like a 10-year-old right there. I mean, even right now I got chills, You pick on me if you want to, pick on me in the comments, but I got chills on my arms. That was the original gravedigger sitting out there. And another thing, he said it still runs. They crank it up and drive it around every once in a while. And I couldn't believe it. I was so excited that I bought me an original gravedigger toy. So we checked out. I bought my sons a couple things. My wife never gets, souvenirs. I always feel bad. I feel like she gets shafted. She doesn't ever want anything though. But we bought our toys, we checked out, and then I went outside and enjoyed the original gravedigger a few more minutes before we hit the road. Then we decided that we're going to make a second attempt at going to the Dismal Swamp. Now, I'm actually going to cover the Dismal Swamp in the very next episode. So I'm not going to say a whole lot about it. I don't want to spoil it. But it is our second attempt. We went several years ago, and we were in a severe drought. And so we tried to go this time, and we ended up on some dead-end road in the middle of nowhere. Of course, the Dismal Swamp is kind of in the middle of nowhere. But we ended up on this dead-end road, and so we gave up on the idea, and we decided to go, keep on riding. But eventually, we came across some really pretty swampland, and I looked on the GPS map, and that was Dismal Swamp. We had ended up alongside of it anyway. I think the part we were passing was actually Dismal Swamp State Park. And so we got a couple pictures of that. I'll try to post that. But Dismal Swamp is really important, and I'm going to talk about that in the next episode. But one thing, kind of a teaser, I guess, is George Washington himself plays a big part in the Dismal Swamp story. And I keep saying Dismal Swamp. It's actually the Great Dismal Swamp. But from there, we went to Merchants MILLPOND State Park. And that was one of our deviations that I had mentioned earlier. We just knew we were going to be kind of close to it, so we decided to check it out. And Merchants MILLPOND, it's another swamp. But this swamp is in Gates County. Now, one thing about me, and you might have picked up on it just a minute ago when I was talking about the Great Dismal Swamp, I love wetlands. It's by far one of my favorite landscapes. I mean, not only are wetlands really unique, but they look dark and mysterious, and sometimes they're scary, but they're teeming with life. It's so much going on out there. And I got tinnitus, my ears ring all the time, but before I got tinnitus, one of my favorite things to do was go down to the lake or the pond or any wetland and just sit there and listen to the sounds of this habitat. And I wasn't disappointed at Merchant's Mill Pond. It was really, really beautiful there. Now, another thing is, and I'm going to talk about Merchant's Mill Pond in a second. I mentioned a couple episodes ago, I think, that I have this idea I hope to accomplish in a few years. I want to get into kayaking. I've never kayaked, but I want to get into kayaking, and I want to kayak the entire Neuse River. And I might actually try to find a way to the coast from the Neuse River. But you go down to Merchant's Mill Pond, and it looks like a kayak heaven down there. Did I say kayak right? It looks like a kayak heaven, a kayak haven. Well, heaven too. Anyway, Merchant's Mill Pond State Park. They started settling that area in 1660. And like most areas in the East, the best way to survive was either agriculture or timber. Well, there was this area called Norfleet's Mill Pond, and it was built in 1811. But it wasn't like any old pond. There was businesses here. You know, you might be thinking like a wetland way out in the woods, but no, there was a bunch of businesses here. There was a grist mill, a sawmill, a farm supply store, and several other businesses around this pond. And in fact, this area became like almost like a business district of Gates County. Well, another thing about this business area, there would always be merchants in there, and so eventually it adopted the name Merchant's Mill Pond. Well, just before World War II, all the businesses at Merchant's Mill Pond shut down. The land was sold to developers, and then in the 1960s, a guy named A.B. Coleman buys the land, and he donates 919 acres, including the mill pond, to the state of North Carolina. And this led to the establishment of Merchant's Mill Pond State Park in 1973. Now, in that same year, 1973, the Nature Conservancy, they contributed 925 more acres. And so today, Merchant's Mill Pond takes up 3,250 acres. And that's definitely one I'm going to go back and do a deeper dive on. And then we head to our last stop of the trip, and that's Medoc Mountain State Park. Now, that's M-E-D-O-C, so if it's Medoc, but it's not medic like a paramedic. So here's the story on Medoc Mountain State Park. Millions of years ago, there were mountains in that area. Within, all the mountains eroded down to its core, and that core was Medoc Mountain. Medoc Mountain is a 325-foot tall biotite granite core of the ancient mountain range. And when I say 325 feet tall, that's 325 feet above sea level. Well, this area used to be owned by Sidney Weller, and he was a farmer and an educator, and he also grew grapes on his farm. And that's because he was a winemaker. Well, it was Sidney Weller who gave Medoc Mountain its name, after a province in the Bordeaux region of France that was famous for its vineyards. Well, in 1970, people started proposing that they turn that area into a state park. Within 1972, the Division of Parks and Recreation started looking around to build this state park. And they decided on Medoc Mountain and the land that surrounded it. And my notes say the Halifax Development Commission got a one-year option to purchase the timber on Medoc Mountain. And this gave the state time to buy the 2,300 acres of land and establish Medoc Mountain State Park. And then, in 1972, Medoc Mountain State Park was born. And after we left Medoc Mountain, unfortunately, we headed home. And don't take that as I hate my home. I love it here, but I love the mountains. I love the beach. And I think I just like getting away from my busy schedule for a few days at least. But that was my vacation to the Outer Banks. And I hope that wasn't too boring. Like I said, it was kind of a last-minute idea. I actually have to hustle now because it's Wednesday that I'm recording this, and I got to get this online by Saturday. But I do hope you enjoyed it. And if you did like the show, leave me a rating and a review, and most importantly, hit the subscribe button, because that really helps the show. And I hadn't said this in a few episodes, but if you got any ideas for episodes, or you just want to reach out and say hello, you can go to the website at www.thenceverythingpodcast.com, hit the contact button, and you can tell me anything you want. Within reason, that is. Some things need to be kept to yourself, but I'm all ears to my listeners. You listen to me, I want to listen to you. And like I said, check the show notes or description. I'll have links to all that stuff down below. And if you haven't already and you're interested, you can join the Facebook group by searching the NC Everything Podcast on Facebook. And there, I post all kinds of North Carolina stuff there. And I'll also post links to my newest episodes there, except for last weekend, because I realized on Monday that I forgot to. But now you know, by this podcast, that I was on vacation, so maybe I can get a pass on that. And you know how I said I might fall asleep at the beginning? I didn't fall asleep, but I'm very, very close right now. So, with that, I will talk to you next time. The music in this episode comes from archesaudio.com and freepd.com.